What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder, where we talk all things Marvel and MCU. I'm your host, Warren Thompson, and today we have our very first look at Loki Season 2. And some behind-the-scenes photos actually start to spark some questions about what we're exactly going to see during Loki Season 2. Now, there are many Disney Plus shows that have had an impact on the MCU, but I don't think there's a show that's had a bigger impact on the MCU as a whole than Loki. Loki explained the multiverse to us. It explained variants, it explained the multiversal war that already happened and is going to happen again, aka Secret Wars. It introduced the TVA, but it also kind of disbanded the TVA, but then created a new one under the control of Kang the Conqueror, and left us with quite a cliffhanger. At the end of Loki Season 1, Loki finds himself back at the TVA and he goes up to his good friend Mobius, who does not know who he is. The same with Hunter B-15. They actually kind of think he's a threat and they call security. So if you're wondering what exactly is going to happen in Loki Season 2, well, we have a tiny glimpse into that today. So we have set photos, behind the scenes set photos of Owen Wilson's Mobius and Tom Hiddleston's Loki, but first, let's start off with an interesting Eternals connection. In some set photos taken by the Noel Theatre in London, we see a bunch of movie posters. One of them is of Kingo, the Eternal. Now, for those of you who watch the Eternals, and for those of you who haven't, spoiler alert if you care, when the Eternals disbanded, Kingo made himself into a famous Bollywood actor over many generations of time. And while everybody thought these actors were played by different people, the son, grandson, great-grandson of the first original actor, it was all just Kingo. And here we see a poster with his face on it. This implies that Loki really is going to start to explore other areas of the MCU, specifically the multiverse and different parts of time. Now, of course, they did this in Loki Season 1 a little bit, but outside of the first episode and second episode, we didn't really dive too much into any connection with any of the other films or other Disney Plus shows. But it seems like for Season 2, that might change just a little bit, and there might be a little bit more of a connection here. Now, right before we dive into the pictures of Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson, there are a couple of other posters here that have other Marvel Comics characters in them, specifically of Zaniac and Phone Ranger. Now, most people probably don't know who these characters are. They're not super prominent characters in Marvel Comics, but they're characters nonetheless. Zaniac first appeared in Thor number 319 in 1982 and is an entity that possesses human hosts, compelling them to kill beautiful women, and it's heavily implied that this person possessed Jack the Ripper and made him do all of those terrible things, and then a movie was made about him later. The phone repairman has a bit of a different, odd story. He was a telephone repairman who gained his powers when he was called to fix a phone that was actually a secret prison to a race of aliens with advanced technology. The phone broke, releasing all of the aliens from the prison, but they left all of their technology behind, giving the repairman access to all of it. So we're already getting a taste of some little tiny Easter eggs that are going to be in Loki Season 2. Now moving on to the set photos of Tom Hiddleston's Loki and Owen Wilson's Mobius, we can actually see both of them very dressed up here. Now, at first, we see just Loki. No TVA agents around him, Mobius is not around him, and there's not really much context to this. However, I do have some theories of what I believe could be happening here, which we'll get to in just a bit. But notice, there are actually vintage cars around Tom Hiddleston. Now, these cars could be collectors, and they could be in a modern time. However, I doubt it. This is a show about the multiverse and time travel, so I'm assuming Loki has gone back in time. And based off of the other movie posters that were shown in the other photos, since they were in London, we could probably assume Loki in this photo is in London as well. And these photos also show us posters for Airport 1975 and Herbie Rides Again, and both of those were released in 1974, so we can assume that this takes place in 1974, whatever scene is being shot here. So we have Loki going back in time, and he's dressed up in a tuxedo, but we also have other photos of Mobius, also dressed up in a tuxedo in the same scene. So the question is, what exactly is going on here? Again, when we left off with Loki Season 1, Mobius had no idea who Loki was, and he called security to come and kind of take Loki away. So what happens from there? Why is Loki not in a prison right now in the TVA? And why are Mobius and Loki both in tuxedos here? Well, we kind of have a few options here, and I'll tell you exactly what I think is going on, but the first option is Loki has escaped, is going to some kind of formal event where he needs to find somebody or find some important piece of information, and Mobius is simply chasing after him. And they both have to dress up in tuxedos because the event calls for that, and they need to blend in. They can't just wear their TVA jackets, obviously they would stick out. Now, that one is a pretty straightforward answer to what could be happening here, but the other ones aren't so straightforward. The second option is that they are actually working together again. The only question is this the same Mobius that Loki knew before and became friends with, or has Loki convinced this new Mobius that we saw at the end of season 1 that Kang the Conqueror is in charge of the TVA and he's bad, and has convinced Mobius to help him defeat him? Now, this kind of all depends on your interpretation of the ending of season 1. Whether you think Mobius is the same person, his memory has simply been altered, or this is actually a variant of the Mobius that we knew. Kang altered everything, and yes, the TVA is supposed to exist outside of space and time. However, the ending made it very clear that things can change and be altered. So those could actually be variants that we saw at the very end, which leads us to our third option. The original Mobius that we met in season 1 has somehow found Loki, or Loki has somehow found him. Mobius probably still has a temp pad, which means he can travel throughout time and space. There is a possibility that he has found Loki, or Loki has found him, and now the two of them are on a quest to stop Kang the Conqueror, overthrow his rule of the multiverse essentially now, or a new sacred timeline that he could have created, and kind of stop the multiversal war. But keep in mind, Loki is the person who knows everything. Yes, it was revealed to Mobius that he was a variant and his eyes were open to what the TVA truly was, but Loki is the one who came face to face with He Who Remains, and He Who Remains explained everything to him, the multiversal war, and the fact that if it happened again, his variants were a lot more evil than him, and killing them would essentially unleash them and start another multiversal war. Now, this storyline itself is really exciting. Obviously, Loki season 2 is going to really introduce us to Kang the Conqueror, and specifically Nathaniel Richards, because it all starts with Nathaniel Richards. That is the original person who goes on to become Kang. Now, Nathaniel Richards actually exists way into the future, in which he then gets his hands on a time travel device. Then he goes back in time and continuously just goes throughout multiple different points in time, and he goes on to conquer a lot of these timelines, which is why he gets his name Kang the Conqueror. So I'm betting that Loki and Mobius, whichever Mobius this could be, a new one or the old one with a new memory and no recollection of what happened before, which would kind of make him new. I'm betting that Mobius is definitely helping Loki, and the two of them are trying to stop Kang the Conqueror somehow. Now, this is supposed to come out after Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which makes sense because in that movie, they are going to truly introduce Kang the Conqueror. He's going to be the main villain of Ant-Man 3, and he's also going to be the main villain of the MCU for a while. And the events that happen in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania are going to be huge. They're going to severely affect the MCU, and it's looking like Loki season 2 could be connected in a big way to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But also keep in mind that there is going to be more than one version of Kang. Heck, there could even be a good version. Perhaps even Iron Lad would show up. But whatever happens, it's looking like it's going to be super exciting. So let me know what you think we're going to see in Loki season 2. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest Marvel news. For live updates, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.